enable them to keep control of it a little bit better, so we haven't seen the injuries that we anticipated. We anticipated a lot of front leg injuries, and so far we haven't seen as many as we anticipated. So,
despite the lack of snow, the dogs are doing just fine. The course is fast and icy in spots, but surprisingly, it's in pretty good shape.
I haven't had any problem at all. I've run on a lot worse trails, so.
Alberta's Roy Gideon was the first to drop out of this year's race. It was his first Bear Grease, and he said the problem was not the course conditions as much as the course itself.
Just, I've never raced in this part of the country before, and I didn't have the type of training I needed for this course.
Roy and his handlers packed up their equipment and begrudgingly began the long trip home this afternoon. A race they had trained for since July did not turn out the way they had planned, but Roy will soon have company because no matter what the conditions, with each passing hour, this race becomes more and more grueling. Which is why for many mushers, a victory in the Bear Grease means not finishing first, but just finishing.
Comfortable with where you are?
Doesn't matter, all I'm doing is getting to the finish line. Where I place is where I place.
On the Bear Grease Trail, Ted Rowlands, News 6.
Who's ready? Huh? Who's ready? Who's ready? Huh? Who's ready?
Okay. I got you now. 14
She comes in here as fast as she can. We sit here for 6 hours. She runs back as fast as she can and hope Jamie can't catch her. And I think with this hard, fast trail, I don't think I don't know. I mean, it's possible, but without a major catastrophe, it's going to be awfully tough to make up an hour. I think she was an hour and 45 out of Beaver behind her. So, I mean, that's a lot of time.
Coalition targeting lowering the number of youth smoking in X initiative, which is a part of Smoke-Free 2000. That is taken from the Canadian model and the California initiative, that youth are very price sensitive, and we know that if a youth has a spare $5 in their pocket and cigarettes are now going to cost $3 a pack, there's some real decision making about cigarettes or the show or a video game or food.
They don't feel like cross-country skis, and they certainly don't look like downhill skis, more like fishing nets for your feet. This year, outdoor enthusiasts are taking on winter in snowshoes.
I think one thing people are getting out of it is getting outside and experiencing nature. It's a good alternative. You don't have to worry about any trail being closed due to snow conditions or having to have trails groomed. You can just go where there's snow.
From beginners to pros, snowshoers broke trail at Jay Cook State Park today after learning how to walk on top of a foot of snow and hearing some lessons on northern wildlife.
I think there's more of a curiosity to see someone coming on snowshoes. That's something that would be an oddity. And so the animals, some of them might be curious.
6,000 years ago, snowshoes were used to make travel across Central Asia easier. Now, snowshoeing is one of the most popular forms of recreation in the Northland.
This year, too, the skiing was really bad if you're a cross-country skier, so I think this is a good substitute, too. And it can get you in the backcountry where the skis can't get you a lot of places.
So whether you're hunting and trapping or breaking new trail, hoping to catch a glimpse of some wildlife, any snowshoer looks forward to the experience of a northern adventure year-round.
And being able to snowshoe and rent snowshoes allows people to continue hiking throughout the wintertime. So I guess that's the biggest benefit, is being able to go when you want and where you want and not have to worry about the snow.
Absolutely. I think winters are much shorter when you have recreation like this.
In Jay Cook State Park, Molly McMillan, News 6.
Trains are rolling down the track through Cook again as crews clean up a pile of mangled cars that derailed Saturday morning. Sonny Flack says he heard strange noises coming from the track across from his home and knew something was going wrong.
They were scraping and some crashing noises going along with it, not the normal rumble of the train.
Flack watched in disbelief as 19 Duluth, Winnipeg, and Pacific rail cars folded up like an accordion.
And it happened kind of like in slow motion, so it was kind of dramatic when you were looking at it.
About 100 people were evacuated for fear of a pneumonia leak, but they were allowed to go back into their homes after it was determined the cars were empty. Luckily, nobody was injured from the derailment, but Homestead Mills was damaged by stray rail cars that smashed into the building.
That green car swung, did what we call a Louis, as the kids, and it came around and crashed into the foundation here, jumped up, and tore everything out into the corner, and still holding that up.
Keith Aho says it felt like an earthquake when the train struck. He says he was talking to some customers in the other end of the building when the train derailed.
So it kind of hits you after the fact on what a near miss we had as far as loss of life or anything like that. So we're fortunate from that standpoint.
Officials with the DW&P Railroad are still investigating the cause of the derailment. In Cook, Gina Katzmark, News 6.
So what this would do, it would allow us to be more accessible, to make our programs more accessible to the community at large. And of course it would benefit our students to have as much diversity as possible within the student body.
For 1st through 4th grade is $3,000 a year. It's as accessible to the community as we can. There's another organization that's going to be meeting as far as whether or not the approval of one would mean the distance from the very day that Educational Frontiers was conceived, and that was early 1990. And when the charter legislation
Every other Wednesday.
Right. What is it? A particular type of business, or are you doing just dilution? Existing
Can enter if they judges that form a panel just got together again about 10 days ago and reviewed judging criteria and finalized what it should look like for this year. And they're real bullish on it and feel as though it was a good effort that results in businesses being better prepared for going out there and doing something that is in effect the American dream, but it's an extraordinary challenge.
Production floor. We do the knitting over in this department where you see all the machines. And then the material flows around, comes back through the finishing department.
Dwayne Putica founded the Wear-A-Knit Manufacturing Company 18 years ago with his wife Sharon. They started in their home, the two of them working by hand. It's a much different scene these days at their factory in Cloquet.
Our family, our children had to come home from school and hold hats and bag them after they got sewn, and it was exciting. And our parents would come down and help us out a little bit. Our neighbors would come over. And
two of those neighbors are still with the company: Charlene Treadle, who works in production, and Mary Hambley in customer service.
Employees. I started out, I was the only one, along with Sharon, in the office, and now there's quite a few of us.
In fact, there are over 50 employees with an annual payroll of over $800,000 a year. Wearinitz makes hats, scarves, mittens, and sweaters. Most of their orders are specialized, featuring logos from schools or businesses. Orders have gone out to as far away as Russia. Clients range from the University of Minnesota to filmmaker George Lucas, for whom Wearinitz used to make personal Christmas gifts. Wearinitz has come a long way in 18 years, and continued growth means probable expansion next year. As many business owners do, Dwayne credits their success to good employees and customer service, and having the courage to make a go of it.
Oh, you're always nervous when you do it, yeah. Yeah, it's a major step. You leave a steady paycheck and go on your own, and that causes a little bit of anxiety.
Number 96 is Matt Riley, and 119, here he comes. Greg Hewitt from Proctor, 119. On the right-hand side. Josh Peters, if we do that, Josh, come on. And Frank Sprock, what a race, Frank. Okay. Oh, man, did he pour it on at the end there. Here comes number 121, 129, 94, and 160. As we approach the 49-minute mark. Let's go, Danny! Go, Dan! 117 is the finish, and that would be White Bear Lake. Main event, of course, though, is our boys varsity race here, and in the blocks now, David Schnorr from Tartan, and 250. Double pulling into the finish. One of our favorites here today. Here he comes. Frank Sprock. What a race, Frank. Okay. Oh, man, did he pour it on at the end there.
It was in this house in the 1700 block of 17th Street in Superior that Mary Daly and her 8-month-old son Christopher died. Investigators ruled it an arson and called the deaths homicides. It was September 23, 1979. These photographs taken moments after the fire was extinguished show the damage. Police say a man was seen running from the house. A gas can was found, but there were no fingerprints found on the can. Police have since developed information on the case. Today, they announced a special task force set up to investigate new leads.
Yes, it's been kind of a snowball thing. It started out rather slowly with just a piece of information developed by the Carleton County Sheriff's Office. And as they went along with that, it began to snowball, and then we got involved in it, and it's been getting progressively larger and larger.
It was on this stretch of Highway 210 that Denise Daly died back in October of 1979. She fell from a semi-truck, and at the time, it was ruled a suicide. But now police say they have information that she was pushed.
Like I say, the reports are destroyed. So all we have to go on is the officers that investigated the accident that number of years ago, their recollection. And some of the recollection is not accurate. Some don't remember. So we're having to deal with a long time frame when people's memories fade and they're not good.
What they do know is that someone came forward in the fall of 1994 to say Denise Daly was pushed and did not jump. Investigators would not say if the cases were directly related, but they did say there are common factors in each. They say if anyone has any information about these deaths, call the Carleton County Sheriff's Department at 218-384-3236 or the Superior Police Department at 715-394-0234. Bill Lunn, News 6.
It was a war of words between people who stand behind law enforcement officials and snowmobilers.
I was there helping load the guy up. I'm a first responder for the town of Fritz.
Neil Gardner was a first responder when a DNR conservation officer was struck by a speeding snowmobiler. That snowmobiler was Dan Fina. Today, Gardner showed up to protest any support for someone who he calls a felon.
I really don't think Dan is owing up to his responsibility. He was sentenced, and he still disclaims that he was the cause of the accident. He is blaming the officers for, first off, even being out there trying to enforce the law.
But an accident review committee did find Dan Fina at fault after conducting an investigation. He was clocked by Gary Lefebvre at 77 miles per hour before the accident. Fina admits he was speeding that day, but insists he slowed down and never meant to hit the officer.
I'm more sorry than almost anyone except probably Gary. You know, he's the one that is hurt the most, and people say that I don't feel for him. And in fact, I do. It didn't have to happen. And they shouldn't make me an example out of it.
I mean, people are reading a lot more into this, you know, that, oh, gee, we're trying to, you know, pit snowmobilers against DNR. No, we're trying to raise money for a friend.
Part of Dan Fina's sentence is that he can't ride another snowmobile for the next 3 years. But in those years, Gary Lefebvre says he still may not be recovered from his injuries. When contacted by phone today, Gary said that while Fina's sentence will last 21 months, his will last his lifetime. He already goes to physical therapy 6 days a week. But he also believes that Fina didn't hit him intentionally. Dan Fina's supporters believe that as well and hope that after today, the case will be appealed. Gary Lefebvre says he doesn't want to rehash any bitter feelings about the accident last year, but he did say today that he has spent most of his life training to be a DNR conservation officer that works in the field, a job he may never be able to practice again. Near Side Lake, Molly McMillan, News 6.
The important thing about this is, for us in United Northern Sportsmen, is that it's a family event. It's another occasion for family to come out and have a good time.
Not a thing? Having a good time, though?
Access to Capital is the name of today's event. It's also the name of the game for many entrepreneurs like Steve Mangan, owner and operator of Omega Marketing. Steve was one of over 275 people taking part in a workshop for small businesses at the deck today.
What I really would like to get out of this, right now we're showing some marketing weakness, and there are some workshops that are addressing specifically marketing, and that's what I would really want to participate in myself.
There's also a lot of people here with capital, and as you know, all startup companies have a need and a requirement for capital.
Steve started his company a year and a half ago. Things are tough now, but he's betting everything will work out and he'll realize his dream of owning a successful business. Today's workshop, hosted by Representative James Oberstar, gave Steve and others a chance to pick up a few pointers in business operation and a few business cards of potential investors.
The agenda basically covers all of the aspects you need to think about when you start a business and where the sources of financing are to help you do so.
The day-long event was sponsored by the UMD Center for Economic Development, the Duluth Chamber, and the Small Business Association. The goal is to help entrepreneurs get the information they need to be successful.
It's a big learning process. In my own particular case, the thing that I began to learn most was the fact that you have to do everything yourself, and I haven't done that for 20 years. Making payroll, for example, I'm the guy that actually writes the checks.
And if everything goes as planned, Steve and the rest of the hopeful entrepreneurs will be endorsing checks as well. In Duluth, Ted Rollins, News 6.
Everything they told her to do. She got put restraining orders, she called the police every time, and nothing. And that damn commissioner keeps letting monitor.
December 14th, Superior Police surround a home. A SWAT team is called, a crowd gathers. The eventual outcome? A young mother is murdered by her estranged husband, who then commits suicide. 2 little girls are left orphans.
Katie cries herself to sleep quite often. Callie is awfully young and doesn't quite. She knows her mom is dead, but she doesn't understand any of it.
A terrible tragedy, but perhaps even a greater tragedy. The situation is not uncommon. And often, like Sandy Johnson said at the scene of her daughter's murder, often the abused woman took every protective step our justice system allows.
When someone makes a decision that they are going to kill someone and or themselves, the system can't stop that. There's no way to take and predict someone's going to follow through on their threats and lock them up forever. There's just no way the system can do that.
No one predicted the horror of August 2nd, 1993. Early that evening, 55-year-old Kay Fritz and her 2 middle-aged house guests were shot to death as they enjoyed a cup of coffee in Kay's living room. Her ex-boyfriend then killed himself. Kay had alerted authorities to his violent threats. The theme is chillingly similar in the murder of 26-year-old Marilyn Morton of West Duluth. On Thanksgiving Day in 1992, her boyfriend was critically stabbed, and she was shot to death by her estranged boyfriend, who then killed himself. She, too, had alerted authorities to his threats of violence. May 13, 1994. A Minong man kills his estranged wife, her boyfriend, and then himself. Cindy Stubbs had a restraining order against Patrick Stubbs, who was free on bond after being charged with intent to do great bodily harm the month before. As the deadly scenarios continue, experts are beginning to question whether the system should be predicting the outcome and being more proactive rather than just reactive.
When something like this happens, it's always very painful because you go through in your mind, what could we have done differently?
Sherry Schultz's mother says there's plenty that could be done differently. She says her daughter's death and the growing number of other domestic murders clearly points out that there's no justice or safety for women attempting to escape abuse.
And I think every domestic call should be taken like it's life-threatening. If you start locking them up right from the very beginning, not only does the spouse get the message or should get the message, Or if he doesn't, then you start getting a paper trail of arrests. But it might stop someone else if they think that the state is taking it very, very seriously.
As the domestic death toll rises, more and more women are taking their protection into their own hands, preparing to use deadly force if necessary. But our investigation has found that these women are unfairly penalized when they fight back. Our investigation shows that women, on the average, are sentenced to prison for twice as long as men for murder, even though the overwhelming majority of women in prison for murder are there for defending themselves from abusive men. At the St. Louis County Courthouse, Barbara Riles, News 6. The last time the couple was together was December 22nd, 1992. On that day, records indicate that Rich Voltland attacked Tina in their home here in this St. Cloud trailer park.
And that's when he proceeded to try to choke me to death. And I remember reaching behind me and pulling a knife off of the counter because I'd been cooking. But I don't remember stabbing him. The next thing I know, I remember him walking away from me. And he was staggering, and I don't know. I don't know what happened, and then I ran for help.
Tina stabbed Rich once in the upper. Defender that she killed Rich in self-defense.
I mean, I was scared. I wasn't angry. I was really, I knew he was going to kill me. You could see his whole eyes, they turned black. You know, he had been drinking. He didn't know what he was doing.
Despite the fact that neighbors reported hearing Tina's cries for help that night and Rich's history of domestic abuse, police told Tina she was facing 80 years in prison for murder. They offered her a plea bargain if she pleaded guilty.
When they came and offered me the 48 months, I asked my public defender what I should do. And she said to take the 48 months because she didn't know if she could do any better.
Tina's sentence was actually lenient in comparison to someone, even in self-defense.
There's a lot more permission in our culture for men to be aggressive. Not to say that it's okay to hurt people, but there's a lot of permission in our culture for men to take out their anger in aggressive ways, to take out their anger, to be angry. There's not a lot of permission for women to be angry and to be aggressive. I think they are penalized. You stepped out of your role.
You weren't ladylike.
You weren't ladylike.
And this isn't the only area of unfairness. But he agrees there needs to be changes.
That most of us in the system have been slow in understanding the dynamics of domestic abuse. And the public in general do not understand the dynamics of abuse.
While in Shakopee, Tina has met her cellmate opted for a jury trial.
Hers, too, is a self-defense case where she was beaten real bad. They gave her 13 years. She took hers to trial.
For Tina, her time in prison has been an... Faced with abuse again, she wouldn't fight back.
I wouldn't go through this again. If I would have known that I would have ended up in prison and that I was going to go through all this mental anguish that I have, I wouldn't have fought back.
I don't know if I have an answer for her, because I don't know if anybody working in the battered women's circles has an answer. I don't know if the police have an answer for those kind of situations.
Tina has a chilling message for all.
Don't buy a gun and don't reach for a knife. You gotta let them kill you. That's the way they've made the law.
At Shakopee Prison, Barbara Riles, News 6. There's a war on, and women are losing. Throughout the Northland, women are dying in increasing numbers at the hand of abusive partners. Intervention advocates have some ideas to make things safer, but they need new laws to do it. 30-year-old Cheryl Schultz depended on the justice system to protect her and lost her life.
She did everything they told her to do. She got put restraining orders. She called the police every time in Bethel.
Douglas County District Attorney Dan Blank offers a solution. He says he'd like to order suspected abusers to undergo a mandatory evaluation to try to determine just how violent they might get.
We're looking at possibly having court orders for a psychological evaluation immediately after the court appearance within, say, 10 days.
The Duluth Police Department is also considering tracking abusers. They're in the process of creating a form that will establish an abuser profile to keep on record. The form would ask questions like, are there guns or other weapons readily available to a person who has beaten his partner? Does the abuser seem preoccupied or obsessed with the victim? Have there been threats of violence? This profile would be available to officers every time they're called to a domestic assault case. Through 10 years of married life, Sue got restraining order after restraining order. Even locking up her abusive husband didn't stop the beatings. He gets out of jail in a few days, and Sue isn't trusting the system to protect her.
Okay. This time, I'm buying a gun, and if he tries to attack me, I will use it. It's either him or me this time. I know it.
Women's advocate Sparrow Puliainen says the court system doesn't take cases like Sue seriously enough. She says it must immediately get tougher on abusers.
Why is it a partner can abuse their wife, whatever, and it's always fifth-degree domestic unless the woman's half dead.
Tina took the battle into her own hands. She fought back, killing her abusive partner as he choked her in their home. Through many years of battering, Tina hid the bruises. And when she required medical attention, she told doctors she fell down the stairs. 2 years ago, as Rich strangled Tina, she reached for a kitchen knife and stabbed him to death. When she was sentenced to prison for murder, she learned a hard lesson.
Don't buy a gun and don't reach for a knife. You gotta let them kill you. That's the way they've made the law.
A solution in this case? Jean DeRider of the Duluth Women's Coalition says medical caregivers should be mandated to report suspected cases of battering, just as they do child abuse.
The same woman, if she does not call the police and has a broken jaw or broken arm and ends up at the hospital, the hospitals will not call in the police.
"29-year-old Tina Smith is in prison for killing a man who repeatedly beat her. Over a period of 5 years, she regularly reported the abuse, filed police reports, asked for police protection, and several times tried to leave him. But in each case, he tracked her down and harassed her until she came back. The last time was in this mobile home park on December of 1992.
And that's when he proceeded to try to choke me to death. And I remember reaching behind me and pulling a knife off of the counter because I'd been cooking. But I don't remember stabbing him. The next thing I know, I remember him walking away from me. and he was staggering, and
Tina stabbed Rich once in the upper left chest. She says fighting for her life.
I knew he was going to kill me. You could see his whole eyes, they turned black. You know, he had been drinking, he didn't know what he was doing.
Autopsy reports indicate Rich died within minutes of that stab wound. Tina was hospitalized with the injuries from the assault, but 2 days later, authorities arrested her and charged her with 2 counts of second-degree murder. Despite the fact that neighbors reported hearing Tina's cries for help that night and Rich's history of domestic abuse, police told Tina she was facing 80 years in prison for murder. They offered her a plea bargain if she pleaded guilty.
When they came and offered me the 48 months, I asked my public defender what I should do. And she said to take the 48 months because she didn't know if she could do any better.
Tina's sentence was actually lenient in comparison to many similar cases. Through our investigation, we have found on the average, women are sentenced to prison for twice as long as men for murder. Some experts say that's because juries just can't accept a woman killing someone, even in self-defense.
People, but there's a lot of permission in our culture for men to take out their anger in aggressive ways, to take out their anger, to be angry. There's not a lot of permission for women to be angry and to be aggressive.
And this isn't the only area of unfairness we found in our justice system. Our investigation shows 93% of women who kill murder abusive partners, and 67% of those women kill that partner as he's beating her. Shakopee's warden says that generally holds true for the 43 women currently serving time there for murder. We also found that men outnumber women 3 to 1 working in corrections and the court system. The greatest disparity comes in judges. Only 4% of those handing out sentences are women. Duluth District Court Judge Robert Campbell doesn't think there is sexism in sentencing, but he agrees there needs to be change.
Most of us in the system have been slow in understanding the dynamics of domestic abuse. And the public in general do not understand the dynamics of abuse.
If Tina had it to do over again, she says she would endure the abuse rather than go to prison.
I don't know if I have an answer for her, because I don't know if anybody working in the battered women's circles has an answer. I don't know if the police have an answer.
Tina has a chilling message for all the battered women out there contemplating defending themselves.
Don't buy a gun and don't reach for a knife. You gotta let them kill you. That's the way they've made the law.
At Shakopee Prison, Barbara Riles, News 6.
Winter is back, and with a vengeance. Thompson's Amoco in Duluth was flooded with calls from stranded motorists all morning.
Yes, it is. It's cold. Bye.
Northlanders woke up to wind chills of up to 55 below and dead batteries. Service reps jumped over 20 cars in under 2 hours this morning and say they're expecting even more calls from stranded motorists into the weekend.
Well, it's been such a mild winter all year long, and with the cold weather, and then they expect weather and cold weather until Tuesday. So today should just be the start of it, and it's just going to get worse from here.
On the road or at home, Joe Abramson says people all over were caught by the cold, unprepared. Today's Arctic blast plunged pipes into a deep freeze.
See, we had no cold weather, and then now all of a sudden this cold weather, so people forget to leave their water run. You got to leave your water run when it gets cold.
Wind chills in low ranges pose a serious threat to people walking or exposing their skin to the cold. Doctors say in these temps, skin can freeze within 1 minute of exposure. If you see white patches on the nose, ears, or face, frostbite has probably set in. If an area shows signs of frostbite, use warm water to soothe the area. Hot water will damage skin tissue. If you need to be outdoors, cover your eyes and mouth to keep cold air from coming in. Avoid wet socks and clothing, and avoid alcohol. Most of us have been through a cold snap like this before, but it never hurts to remind people to think summer. It's only 130 days and about 75 degrees away. In Duluth, Molly McMillan, News 6.
Keep speaking until the kind of stuff that I went through, nobody has to go through. I'm going to do what I can to make sure that that doesn't happen to anyone else.
Jamie Nabuzny says his school years in Ashland were plagued with repeated incidents of physical and verbal abuse. His story grabbed the attention of the Northland when he filed a lawsuit against the Ashland School District. Parents and friends of lesbians and gays gave their support and understanding to him as he spoke of his experience growing up in the Northland.
Except that I was plagued by lousy self-esteem.
P. Flagg and Together for Twin Ports Gay and Lesbian Youth are celebrating diversity and joining a campaign to make schools and communities safer for gay, lesbian, and bisexual youth.
But if people just put forth the effort and aren't scared to ask questions and to understand people who might be different from where they're standing from, I think a lot can be done.
And beyond understanding, P. Flagg member Brooks Anderson says the community has a responsibility to speak out against harassment and abuse.
So I think when enough people stand up on this issue, we can turn that around.
Gina Katzmark, News 6.
About 30 people gathered on the steps of the St. Louis County Courthouse to protest what many in the Native American community call discrimination.
What is it? Open season on Indian women?
Duluth Police Chief Scott Lyons put in an appearance at the protest to counter the charges, only to be met with an angry confrontation over the release of one of the suspects.
If there was justice, they would be sitting in that jail. There's not none. What I see here, when it's boiling down to, I hate to say it, but it's a racial discrimination thing against my people, and that's why I'm here to support my family.
I understand what you're saying, Pete, but that's not the way it is from our perspective at all. We've always gone out of our way to make sure in any type of case such as this, a homicide, we've had people working day and night on this thing.
Chief Lyons explained to protesters that Olson's body was thoroughly frozen, which delayed the autopsy and held up the investigation. He stressed officers have been working overtime and doing everything they can to move the case along.
We've had probably 40 investigators on this thing from the start. As far as where we're at in this investigation, there's leads that have progressed pretty well from the time on Tuesday until today, actually.
But Lyons' words did little to appease the angry and frightened crowd.
If they can kill, if they can murder and get away with it, then it'll be open season on Native American people.
How many more bodies do I need to find before justice is done to the American Indian people? This is a racist city here in Duluth.
The Native American people said today is just the beginning. They said they intend to stay here and make their presence known until they feel justice is done. At the St. Louis County Courthouse, Barbara Riles, News 6.
In December, we made the announcement that we were not going to go back out in the lake, and that is our position at the current time.
Despite the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's confidence that what lies at the bottom of Lake Superior is simply a collection of well-sealed, harmless containers, a growing group is not so sure, and they are asking for further exploration. The Superior City Council, the Duluth City Council, even the City Council in Thunder Bay have all recently asked the MPCA to bring up more barrels. All along, environmentalists have been doing the same.
It isn't right to do this, and if they are toxic, which is becoming more clear, there is different levels of different chemicals in there. It doesn't appear that it should be in the lake. They should be in a containment facility, maybe down in Arden Hills where they got contaminated groundwater, or maybe where it was produced, but not in the lake.
There have been a total of 9 barrels brought up from the depths of Lake Superior. 1,500 remain. The question is, do they pose a threat to the environment? The answer can only be obtained by bringing more barrels up. The problem with that...
Well, at this point, we know that we've expended about $500,000 to investigate 9 barrels. And if you extrapolate that out, you're talking about millions and millions of dollars to pull up more barrels. So it becomes a matter of wise use of taxpayer money versus the cost-benefit of bringing up more barrels.
The MPCA is responding to recent concerns by forming a panel of government agencies and environmental organizations to review the facts and hopefully come to an agreement on what should be done about the barrels in Lake Superior. In Duluth, Ted Rowlands, News 6.
So they're accurate, and we're in serious trouble. We are really in serious financial trouble.
Just a few months from the end of a school year, District 318 may lose teachers, special programs, and money for new equipment. Last week, the school board proposed chopping more than $1 million from the school's budget.
Oh, it's extremely painful when you're trying to meet the needs of youngsters and you have fewer and fewer resources, and of course the inflationary factors don't go away. It's going to be an extremely painful spring.
Minnesota Governor Arnie Carlson is proposing an 8% increase in education funding, but Luoma says it would take at least a 14% increase for the district to function. Here's the kind of money they may lose. Transportation, less drivers, more kids on the bus, and money for any new classroom equipment. Over $20,000 in cooperation revenue and more than $90,000 in the facility's budget. Teachers say they're already using textbooks that are 10 years old, and there's a limited amount of computers, most of them older models compatible with programs students will rarely use in high school or college. Without new technology, teachers say the impact on students will be devastating.
And the only thing we can do is cut back. And when we cut back on operations, we assume we cut back on education, and that can't be good.
The only hope the district will see more state dollars is after the legislative session. Education may receive unexpected revenue, but Luoma says increased educational costs will absorb any extra money. State law requires the school district to notify personnel of any layoffs by April 1st. In the meantime, different departments are looking at other alternatives to cutting costs. They'll bring those proposals in front of the school board this Friday. In Grand Rapids, Molly McMillan, News 6.
These over there that get
This is the same area that we searched for Dan Hamilton in the past, yes.
A team of trained search dogs combed the Mississippi River this morning for any sign of Daniel Hamilton. A search last November turned up nothing, but authorities say they still believe Daniel's body may be in the water.
We're optimistic. We're fairly certain that we were right on target last time we were here, and it was just the environment for personal safety was just too risky.
The river's temperature was too cold in November, so authorities waited. Today, search dogs alerted divers to a location on the river. One after the other, Divers went in. The family of Daniel Hamilton has witnessed searches like this before. For 3 days, the Aiken County Sheriff's Department, along with over 100 volunteers, searched for Daniel Hamilton on November 27th. Soon after, the Sheriff's Department called off the search and never found out what had happened.
It's been hard not knowing. You know, I mean, sure, he could be alive, but then you have to think, you know, maybe he's not. It's been hard.
Way down.
After several hours of braving the river's cold temperatures and powerful currents, the divers once again called off the search, saying they may have to wait until the weather is warm to search again.
I was told by the dog handlers that they were comfortable they were in the right area.
Until another search is organized, the family of Daniel Hamilton may never know what happened the day he left for a hunting trip, November 20th, and never returned home. In Jacobson, Molly McMillan, News 6.
We don't know.
A desperate situation, kids playing out on thin ice. One boy is on his way to the hospital. Now rescue efforts turn to the other boy and the Good Samaritan who tried to help the kids. Both the boy and man are under the ice. Onlookers watch in horror. Rescuers slowly get closer to the spot. The ice is only 2 or 3 inches thick in areas. Family members are in shock. They hope, they pray. There is a break. The massive effort by divers is working. The man is found. They work on him. Minutes after he is taken away, divers make their second rescue. They find the other boy. He's been under the water for over an hour. They work with precision. Emotions aside, they work to save him. It all started as a day of playing for 2 young boys. It ends tragically. Nearby, there is a confused dog. He's waiting. It was his owner who tried to save those 2 boys. At Carter Lake, Vanita Sokar, Channel 6 News.
There's demonstrations in the Art Institute areas, the Duluth Children's Museum, down in the Transportation Museum. There's going to be a live rehearsal of the play Obits from 6 to 8 tonight. So we've got a lot going on right in through the evening.
I create them problems with filing all civil actions against them for constitutional violations. They say I cause too much resources on them, and so everybody's got to get some time with me.
Audie Fox is in Oak Park Heights Prison serving a life sentence for the 1981 murder of a Minnesota cop. He's transferred from prison to prison every 6 months because, as Fox says, he just wears them out. In tonight's Extra, a story about prisoners exercising the one bit of control they can over their keepers. Each year, hundreds of federal lawsuits are filed against the system, taking issue with everything from prison living conditions to underwear that's too tight. Audie Fox has filed more than a dozen of them, costing the Attorney General's office alone some $60,000. KARE 11's Rick Kupchella has an expensive story of crime, punishment, and red tape retribution.
The pictures that day out of the little town of Coleraine were telling enough at the time. Even the most inexperienced lawman knew something was desperately wrong. But while the news spread fast through the old mining town, it took a while for the facts to sink in. One of a few longtime lawmen of Itasca County, Robert Lawson, using his day off to answer a call regarding the welfare of children, was shot in the back of the head. Audie Fox was tried and convicted for the murder, sentenced to life in prison, where he sits today far out of the reach of the common man. But he's found new victims even here. Mr. Fox is rather sly. Here inside prison walls, he focuses his anger not with a gun at a lawman's head, but rather with a pen pointed directly at the public. In just the last several years, he's figured out how to turn hard time into a platform for prisoners' rights, filing lawsuits against the state, one after another, 14 in the last 6 years. He's never won a case. Every time he's heard in court, he loses, and so do you, because the cost for the suits, now exceeding $60,000 for Mr. Fox alone, is paid in full by Minnesota taxpayers.
The window's in the wrong spot.
You not only house and feed him, you pacify him, covering the cost of everything from his law books to his postage stamps to legal assistance, copies, and court filing fees. $60,000 and counting.
I know I did wrong. I'm in here, for serious crime, but I still, should be treated like a human being with my rights.
Fox says he's found violations of his constitutional rights here at Oak Park Heights. He says he found them at Stillwater and at St. Cloud's Prison, too. Every violation he puts into a lawsuit. In this case, tossed out by a federal judge, Fox claimed it was a violation of his constitutional rights because he was being served peanut butter when he'd specifically asked for peanuts. There are all kinds of other alleged constitutional violations in here that made it all the way to a federal judge, including cold lunches, small portions, an insufficient variety of beans, and a complete lack of salsa. And by the way, when Mr. Fox did get the salsa, he complained it was a violation of his constitutional rights because the salsa wasn't fresh. All elements of these complaints he tried to tie to religious persecution, but the judge called that factually and legally insupportable. You really believe every one of these cases is a violation?
I do, yes.
You have yet to ever find a court that said, yes, this is a violation of law, he's right. You never found a judge to do that yet, have you?
The majority of them, no.
It is a fact, Fox has never won a case, never once, no part of a claim ever validated. He says that's because the courts don't care. If that's what you believe, and you haven't had any real success bringing any of these suits, why do you keep bringing them?
My right.
Give me two of those. Back on the range, the deputy gunned down that night is still remembered.
Fill up the top part and bring it back to me and I'll enter you in the drawing.
Every year, the man who believed in children who helped create the arena where they skate today is memorialized with a hockey tournament in his name.
3, 4, 5, and 5 is 10. Thank you.
Friends and family have raised $50,000 for children's athletics here. Well, that's a mighty accomplishment for this little mining town. They are dumbfounded at the notion it wouldn't cover the cost of Mr. Fox's legal bills.
It's unbelievable.
It's like they get in jail and they think that they have all these rights, and they don't. I mean, really, he's in a position where he should be not requesting anything.
He needs to be responsible for what he has done. I mean, I feel he owes society something.
But what do we, you know, he's just continuing to abuse society, it sounds like.
He sounds like a spoiled brat, demanding what he wants.
I knew him since he was a little kid. He was a spoiled brat then.
Here at the town's arena, people gather for the kind of sport Deputy Beefy Lawson loved most in life, and they remember the violent end he saw.
It was like an execution. He wasn't like shot. He was told, lay down on the floor and you tell me where my wife is, count of 5 or I'm going to kill you. What he did, he just put the gun behind his head and counted to 5 and shot him. This is like a cold, cold, cold execution.
Number 15, Mr. Bob Lawson.
Out on the ice every year, playing in the games, is Robert Lawson's son by the same name. He works for his father's department, and he shares the public's disdain for the man who committed so much violence against his family.
He says he's got rights.
Yeah, I feel he gave up his rights. The minute he premeditatedly shot my father in the back of the head, he lost every right that he had as far as a citizen to this country.
Look, inmates are human beings. They're persons under the Constitution. They're entitled to rights.
Back home in the cities, John Grisbeck is an attorney who helps Fox file papers.
Tell me this. Why should our society give a damn about Mr. Fox? He killed a cop. He's in prison. He's complaining about light switches. He's complaining about food.
No, you can come and go as you want.
Why should we care about him? That's not the issue. The issue is, should we uphold the Constitution? If we deprive Mr. Fox of his due process rights today, it's not a great leap to deprive you or I of those same rights in the outside world.
It seems like a big leap.
I don't think so.
I got a self-help litigation manual book.
No inmate losing lawsuits in the state of Minnesota has cost the public more. And as Fox moves forward, reminding us that some of his suits are still undecided, we will wait to see how many more he might file, knowing all along that win or lose with Mr. Fox, we are always losing more. Rick Kupchelik, KARE 11 News.
Fox has at least 3 federal cases pending. While the Attorney General's office does not believe Fox's claims have any merit, they were willing to settle out of court for $1,500 with the agreement he would be shipped out of state and file no more lawsuits here. But talks have broken down because, according to the Attorney General, Fox wanted to reserve the right to file one more suit. If this makes you mad, tomorrow we'll bring you a story that could make you even more mad.
And if people violate my due process, my protection, and my privacy, and my freedom of speech, and things like that, I'm going to sue them. And the taxpayers are going to pay it. It's just that, that's just that simple.
Jimmy Starnes is just one reason the Minnesota Attorney General has 4 employees working full-time on lawsuits filed by prisoners. We'll show you how much these suits cost you and tell you how our report will soon give you an opportunity to do something about it. That's tomorrow in the Extra at 10. Belinda Jensen's already out in the backyard, I think. Aren't you out there?
I'm out here.
Hello.
Hello.
It's been a little chillier weekend than we were expecting, hasn't it?
We need to change gears here.
But I don't think we're
Something
going to.
Jimmy Starnes is only one of hundreds of prison inmates fighting back against the system that put him there and costing you money in the process. In tonight's Extra, the blizzard of prisoner paperwork that's helping clog our courts and in many cases waste taxpayer money.
Inmates have the right to file lawsuits, and they're increasingly doing so for any reason they can think of. Federal courts paved the way for inmate lawsuits in the 60s. Back then, there were a few hundred filed. This year, there will be more than 40,000, sometimes meaningful, but most times not. In Minnesota, inmate lawsuits cost taxpayers more than $300,000 last year alone. They're suing over everything from bottled water to tight underwear. And that's prompting calls for reform of our legal system. In a moment, how you can help get things changed. But first, here's KARE 11's Rick Kupchelik.
Were it not for the high fence and razor wire here at Lino Lakes Prison, you might mistake the place for a college. Oh, there are differences, to be sure. A lack of real freedom, and prison's more expensive than college. But this is among the state's least restrictive prison settings, minimum and medium security. It's the housing here that seems most close to college, the cells that look like dorms. But none of this makes Jimmy Starnes any happier.
Look how much room I got.
He's so angry, in fact, he's about to take you to court.
I know you look at it and you think, you know, nice blinds, nice bed, color TV and everything. It's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable.
A lot of people are going to look at this and they're going to say, he is whining.
Call it what you want. Call it what you want. I hope you don't use that word.
Why?
Because I'm not whining. I deserve better than this.
Jimmy, you are in prison.
So what?
Jimmy's in prison right now on stalking and harassment charges. He has a criminal history, including attempted rape and kidnapping. He's been in prison most of his adult life. He doesn't like the room, too small, so he's suing the State Department of Corrections, which is essentially you. Now the DOC will have to hire lawyers at taxpayer expense, and if the case goes the way most of them go, for every other inmate that sues, he'll almost certainly lose. But Jimmy doesn't really care.
I don't think it's a matter of winning or losing. I think that I get some kind of self-satisfaction out of it because I know that the Attorney General's office had to take several hours to answer my lawsuit, and they had to spend probably a few $1,000s.
That sounds like getting even.
Well, call it what you may. Call it what you may. It's satisfaction for me.
That's outrageous. That's why we want to put an end to these kinds of frivolous matters.
Attorney General Skip Humphrey has a lot more than Jimmy Starnes on his hands. A couple hundred similar suits are filed every year in Minnesota. He has 4 full-time positions dedicated to the cause. And while Humphrey knows he'll most always win, there's defeat every time he's kicked into gear by another inmate like Jimmy Starnes.
Jails are not, and prisons are not supposed to be playhouse time. They are not supposed to be places where these fellas have all the opportunity to just create more havoc and cost us all more.
You think Jimmy's outrageous? Take a look at some of these cases we pulled from the office of your Attorney General. And remember, he has to work on them. It's the law. The case of Eugene Brown, who took us to court because he said his underwear was too tight. He called it cruel and unusual punishment. The judge tossed it. Trash. Here we have another inmate suing the President of the United States for giving him, quote, a fungus which spread all over his body and limbs. Something about experimental research. The judge, figuring out exactly what to say, said it wasn't a violation of the Constitution. Trash. And here we have the case of Lemoyne Jones, desperately needing to buy a vowel. He literally filed a federal lawsuit with virtually no vowels. We don't know what it says. Neither does the judge. He tossed it. Trash. Finally, you can look at any number of the cases filed by Stiletto Carlucci Luciano. Here he filed a federal lawsuit when he wasn't transferred to the prison of his choice. Here he filed a suit because he wasn't given a radio. And here he filed a federal lawsuit when he wasn't given Maalox on demand. The judge tossed them all as frivolous. One more thing, Mr. Luciano is not Italian. His real name is Blakely. He changed it officially through the courts. You paid for that too. The real issue is how much does this trash cost? Last year, Minnesota's Attorney General spent more than $300,000 fighting inmate lawsuits, less than 5% of which ever made it beyond the bin.
Well, I think it's a problem because it's extremely costly. It's very time-consuming. That's always going to be a problem. I think you'd find few corrections agencies across the country that would say it's not a problem.
Fact is, Minnesota, as outrageous as our cases can get, keeps a low profile nationally. While we might pick up a couple hundred more cases this year, nationally, inmates will file more than 40,000. And remember, it's not just the AG that's crippled by the bills, it's the federal courts. And that's your federal tax money, so you pay part of the tab in Houston, for example, where inmate lawsuits are expected to run to $5 million this year. In New York, there were more than 1,600 cases filed last year, and they barely made it into the top 5, behind Texas, California, Missouri, and Florida. But here, like nationally, there's not a lot of ownership in the problem. Watch the ball bounce. Is it too easy to file these suits, to occupy the time of the state, whether it's corrections or attorney general, or is it too easy?
Well, I think it's very easy to file a lawsuit. Anybody can do it.
Should it be more difficult for a prisoner?
That I think you'd have to have the courts answer.
First of all, that's a congressional determination, and we'll leave that to the first branch of government.
Now, if those named in the suits aren't motivated to change anything, and the courts aren't doing it, who is?
I'm frustrated with the system. I think we do need to make some changes. I think we do have to make some reforms.
Well, maybe the guy who's paying the bills. Humphrey knows the situation could be worse in Minnesota, but he knows it's pretty bad already, and he doesn't have to look much further than Jimmy Starnes to count the ways.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
That's 9 different lawsuits.
9 different lawsuits.
Just right now.
Just right now. And guess what? There may be some more. You send me to prison, I got rights, I got access to the courts. If I'm bothered, don't bother me, leave me alone.
Because you're going to sue.
I'm going to sue. What's that say?
In a very real sense, lawsuits are the last vestige of any power inmates hold. It is real power with broad range. It can protect this most vulnerable class of people, and it can make a mockery of the courts.
Do people in society look at prisoners completely wrong? I refuse to have my dignity taken away from me. That I shouldn't be abused. I shouldn't be treated like a criminal. Why take my dignity?
I mean, honestly, you are a criminal.
Okay.
With every filing in the courts, Jimmy is literally taking advantage of his rights. The rights of prisoners never cost us more. Rick Kopchelik, KARE 11 News.
Take more to the library than...
Starnes' unsettled lawsuits include claims that he was abused by police officers and that he's being denied treatment at the prison. Right now, the State Attorney General's office is working on new legislation that would curtail lawsuits filed by inmates, and they could use your help. Staff workers are standing by right now to take your calls. In the metro area, the number is 296-3353 or toll-free 1-800-366-3787. And if you're hearing impaired, call 1-800-366-4812. They will provide you with a draft copy of the proposed legislation and direct you to your legislator. Again, they're on duty right now.
I'm waiting for your call. Let's go out to the backyard with Ken Barlow right now. Earlier this evening, a little snow flurry.
KARE 11 News with Paul Major, Pat Miles, Randy Shaver, sports, and meteorologist Ken Barlow.
He's a walking, talking lawsuit and says he doesn't care if he wastes your money, but tonight, hundreds of you are saying enough is enough. Good evening. Lawmakers are promising tonight to stop prison inmates from filing frivolous lawsuits.
Those lawsuits cost Minnesota taxpayers more than $300,000 last year alone. Inmates are suing over everything from cold lunches to their prison-issued underwear. After last night's story, enough KARE 11 viewers called the Attorney General to overwhelm his phone system. Tonight, thanks in large part to your concern and your action, lawmakers are lining up to make changes. KARE 11's Rick Kopchelik reports.
Last night, we introduced you to Jimmy Starnes, a man who has 9 pending lawsuits right now. He's suing because he says the cell he's in is uncomfortable. One time, he actually sued a building. He's never won a case, and he doesn't really care. He's not paying for it anyway.
What do you think about the notion of all of this being taxpayer finance?
It's their problem.
Outrage over the system was funneled last night and today into the offices of Attorney General Skip Humphrey, who's pushing legislation to cut back frivolous filings.
Well, the response was overwhelming. In fact, our phone lines got jammed, and all the calls came in, and thousands of citizens, we think, got busy signals.
Humphrey's legislation would require inmates to pay filing fees and court costs, tapping into their prison earnings for the bill. And it would give judges authority to not allow new filings until the first case is paid for. What's more, the bill would block early release for an inmate deemed to have filed a malicious lawsuit. And finally, it would allow prisons to collect money from an inmate who wins in court to help cover the cost of incarceration. Humphrey's been pushing the bill for a while, but Jimmy Starnes put it on the front burner.
I shouldn't be treated like a criminal.
You are a criminal, I mean, honestly.
Anyone that watched that series was infuriated. And that was legislators, citizens, whomever. I mean, it made you mad just watching these guys thumb their nose at the system.
I just get real tired of just focusing on rights, because to me there's another side of that coin, and that's responsibility.
If it means money out of their own pocket, then I think they might think twice.
The movement is coming fast and furious at the state legislature. The bill should be introduced before week's end. And lawmakers say it should be law shortly after that. Rick Capcella, KARE 11 News.
There are already efforts underway to restrict inmate lawsuits at the federal level. Congress is looking to make new laws, and the federal court locally is considering changes as well.
A volunteer youth minister is facing charges tonight that he sexually abused a juvenile. Jim Newman volunteered at Holy Trinity Catholic Church in Winsted. He's facing 9 charges in connection with the alleged assault, but officials say Newman's confessed to at least 3 other assaults.
Mr. Noldberg, President Keenan and Council. First off, I want to point out there is a replacement for 215, an opportunity to meet with him while we're out in Washington. Maybe I got spoiled or accustomed to some rescissions from this year's funding. They're actually reducing the existing, which is what then triggered us into doing the letter, and then Mr. Mackey put the letter together and got that out, and it was dated the February 27th.
Again, so we have 2 things. I think we have.
There was discussion as to whether or not the whole area should be leveled and start over and put brand new buildings down there, and it was a solid, unanimous no way, that we're not going to do that. We're going to provide and keep the history of what we have and make sure that that history continues.
I went to their section final in a 9,000-seat arena against Apple Valley, and 8,000 people were for Apple Valley, so we don't expect anything different, and I think that'll help carry us through.
Property assessment is higher by 15% or more than similar properties.
For the first time in a generation, a Duluth school has returned from a state hockey tournament with a big prize. The Duluth East Greyhounds, fresh from their triumph over Moorhead last night, return home today loud and proud. Dignitaries were there, fans and families were there, but there was one other important item on hand that was the center of attention. The championship trophy, well and truly earned.
And then the kids started believing that they could do it, and we had to fight a little letdown in the Edina game. We didn't have any. We played an excellent hockey game, and then in the championship game, they found a way to get it done in the 3rd period. And we came through a tough bracket, got it done, and I don't think there's any doubt who's the #1 team in the state.
The outward sign of a job well done is the championship trophy, but every tournament has its share of poignant stories. Take East goalie Kate Lettingham, for example. He didn't play in the section finals, but pulled his game together to backstop his team to a state championship.
It's a great feeling. I've had a real rough year, and to come out here and play the way I did, prove to myself that I could play and play for the rest of the guys on the team, it's a great feeling. I'm glad I could go out there and play my best for them.
Sometimes the subplot is a player who performs well. Sometimes it's a piece of clothing. You may have seen the Duluth East t-shirts made after the Jefferson game. 9-goal tourney scorer Dave Spihar explains what they mean.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Some guy made them up as either as a joke or serious. I don't know, because Jefferson, as you know, they're a powerhouse, and they got t-shirts that say back-to-back state champions, any questions, and we beat them, so they made them. I don't know. I think they're kind of neat.
Nobody has any questions now?
I don't think so.
After their performance of the last 3 days, if anybody has any questions now, chances are folks are keeping them to themselves. In Duluth, Jeff Pappas, News 6.
50-50 chance of doing it. Maybe I'm just going to stand right here and come out, cut the angle a bit, go back and see what happens. He scores! Well, if you want... 5.
As you said, everyone comes out every single game and they want to beat East, but you get used to it after a while and you realize that you got to come out every single game, be ready to play, otherwise you'll get in trouble. So you get used to it.
When I got the job 7 years ago, it was a dream, and there's so many coaches that coach in the state that don't even get to it. And then if you look at the number that win it, I mean, you know, what can I say? I mean, it's a dream for me, it was a dream for the players, and we are one happy bunch.
And they had popsicle sticks, and so you have to pretend you're a bird, and so that's the only way you can find out how birds are going to do that kind of thing.
Learning how a bird eats worms is difficult to show in a classroom, but by pretending they're birds, these toddlers are experiencing with their own hands how animals survive outdoors.
What might you use a feather that's nice and soft like that for if you were a bird? Warmth. Good job.
Kinnan Stauber brought her son to Hartley Field for a nature lesson because she thinks outdoors living is learning.
Well, there's the wet snow, there's the real trees out here, you can hear the birds. You know, it's not anything fake, and we've got a beautiful day, sun's shining.
And how much more could kids learn by walking through Hartley Field in search of birds if the field was expanded into a total nature center? Well, educators at Hartley Field are asking the St. Louis County Board to fund a project that would do just that. If approved, the Nature Center would include an educational building located behind Hartley Pond. Kids would start there and then take what they've learned out into the environment.
And it helps to have that kind of shelter to do that when you're working, you know, in the elements that are here most often in Duluth.
The expansion of Hartley Field is an idea supported by Commissioner Will Mattson.
I grew up there. It's a marvelous place. And we can, I think we can do a lot of things that are positive for the community with a nature center like that, positive for the region, actually.
But today, the board postponed any decision on whether they'll help pay for the project, claiming they need more time. That's okay with these kids. While the Hartley project waits, they'll spend their time hunting for signs of wildlife.
Hold it. Aha. Ah, found a track.
And what kind of track do you think that is?
In Duluth, Molly McMillan, News 6.
Guy was home, these two would be getting shot.
It's common to see dogs wandering the streets of Kettle River. After all, this is a quiet little country town of just 190 people. But now folks here are a little uneasy about letting their dogs roam around. Witnesses say this dog, a German short-haired named Ginger, was shot and killed yesterday by John Watoshik, who used to be the mayor. The dog belonged to Joseph Rickman, who moved here from New Jersey to escape senseless violence.
You know, everything was pretty good up until this guy just ruined my life, just tore my heart out.
Meanwhile, witnesses say the dog was on the street when it was shot in broad daylight.
And I saw my neighbor John Watoshik with a pistol in his hand, shooting at a dog. I saw the dog walking over there. And I heard him shoot a couple times, and pretty soon the dog went down. The dog was laying there yelping. And then at that time, I went in the house and called 911.
Another witness says he saw the former mayor's son drag the dog into a garage and then heard the dog being beaten.
To shoot somebody's dog is just, that sickens me.
Police say they cannot comment on the case, but they can confirm it is under investigation. Evidence of the shooting remains even today. If you look over here, you can still see a blood trail leading right into this garage.
And though the blood remains here today, John Watoshik was nowhere to be found. Channel 6 News also tried to talk to Watoshik at his work and left a phone message that was not returned. Rickman, meanwhile, isn't sure what he'll do next.
It's terrible that things like this happen today. And somebody can have such a cold heart to maliciously kill a dog that was physically doing him no harm, wasn't even on his property. Just in city limits, just come out and just start firing, just to kill it for no reason whatsoever. Makes no sense.
In Kettle River, Bill Lunn, News 6.
I went to bed at night, never felt a thing. Woke up in the morning and I thought somebody had, beat me up.
What 74-year-old Garvin Broyne had was a strep infection that has now killed 4 people in southeastern Minnesota since January. February 20th, doctors told the Wanamingo man the deadly bacteria had worked its way into his left shoulder. He was hospitalized for 5 days. He has no clue how he contracted it.
No, I didn't. And this, I guess, is what buffaloed the doctor in Samroda. He kept quizzing me for a long time. I mean, trying to find out if I had been hurt or if I'd been cut, if I had a sore throat or whatever. I mean, but I couldn't give him an answer.
The strep bacteria is a cousin of strep throat, but this invasive bacteria is far more serious. It can leave a person permanently disfigured or cause death before the signs are fully recognized. According to a physician's alert circulated by the State Department of Health, 8 cases of the Group A strep disease have been reported in southeast Minnesota since January, half of them in Wanamingo, 2 in Rochester. 6 cases were caused by the same strain, 4 of them the so-called flesh-eating bacteria. 2 were toxic shock. In 5 of the 8 cases, the victims had other medical conditions that would have driven down their immune system, like diabetes or alcoholism. This 60-year-old Wanamingo man was on steroid drugs for his arthritis. He went to the hospital after slamming his finger in a car door. He was dead 5 days later. According to his death certificate, the flesh-eating bacteria killed him. In Rochester today, state health officials were examining lab results and trying to get a handle on what their alert describes is an outbreak. As for Garvin Broyne, he's just learning about the bacterial bullet he dodged.
I suppose I got to say I'm lucky. I suppose I got to say I'm lucky I'm here.
It's the kind of weather most of us have been waiting for. The winter wasn't that bad, but...
yeah, you still couldn't get out and skate.
But today, you could skate and do just about anything you wanted under the sun. And there's something about the warm weather that makes us do things we haven't felt like doing all year long.
Maybe want to go out and run 8 miles.
And it looks like you've just about accomplished that.
Almost, yeah.
But is it our imagination, or does the sun really have an effect on our overall mood? Dr. Kathy Wisner says yes.
Most of us will have this experience on a day like today of having increased energy, of just feeling really good, wanting to get out and do things that you haven't been able to do.
While most of us get that energized feeling, some of us go overboard with it. We become euphoric, can't sleep at night, and have so much energy no one else can seem to catch up with us. It's called seasonal affective disorder, only this time of year it's in reverse. So, doctor, when it gets to the point of overkill, certainly that can become a problem.
Certainly if the person's not sleeping, if they're just so energized, it's interfering with their ability to function at work or in social relationships, that's the time to seek treatment.
But if you're not at that point, you may as well enjoy it now, because even a 3-year-old can predict what lies ahead. So you think you'll need that big heavy coat again?
Yeah.
At some point you're going to need it again?
Yeah.
When do you think that might be?
When it's cold.
Donna Terrell for NBC News.
Fan support is vital in high school athletics, as in any sport, and state tournament time is no exception. So when Anna and Rita Townsend of Esco take the floor this weekend at the state tournament, they've got an added edge, their own rooting section from around the country.
Ryan is at Mayville State, North Dakota. Shireen is from, next to the oldest daughter, is from McHenry, Illinois. So they've all converged on this place to hoop it up a little.
There are 13 kids in the Townsend family, and every one of them is at the tournament this week, some of whom have even been there as players.
It's exciting for me, especially with my sisters on the team. I wish I was down there with them, but I don't know. I'm so nervous right now.
The tournament is doubling as a family reunion. Brothers and sisters from around the country are in the cities to watch Anna and Rita play.
We don't have many chances to do that. Christmas is about the only other one, so maybe this will be an annual thing.
With all the Townsends arriving from various parts of the country for this game today, the one thing they all wanted to see was an ESCO victory, but sadly, that wasn't in the cards.
But even though the Eskimos didn't win in the quarterfinals, the sisters sure appreciated the support.
They have been really supportive, and they come to all the games, and along with my parents and my brothers and sisters, my grandparents have come to almost every single game through my career, and it's really nice to have that.
It was really nice. It's always nice to have everyone come down, and then they always have stuff to talk about when you get home.
Basketball is, of course, a family tradition with the Townsends, who hope to hold a few more reunions just like this one in years to come. In Minneapolis, Jeff Pappas, Channel 6 News. They are the sights and sounds of spring. Drills and hammers, sprouts and sap bags. The signs are all there, and that means it's time for Pat Coughlin to head back into the woods.
Yeah, when you start getting 40-degree days and freezing at night, it's time.
When the weather changes, maple trees are tapped for sap, which eventually becomes syrup. Pat Coughlin has been tapping trees since he was a boy, though it's done differently now than when he was younger.
Just a 7/16 drill, and drill a little bit at an angle, probably 10 degrees or so at an angle. In 2 inches.
You don't have a guide in there, you know, 2 inches.
Well, right here. See that right in the drill right about there. See, just seeing it's running out already. Well, I used to do it by hand, and then they'd have a sumac, you know what sumac tree is, and it's got a kind of a hollow center. So they'd carve that and put that in, and then poke a rod or something through the center to make the hole, and then it would, instead of pail underneath it. Or...
Though the method may have changed, one thing about the annual rite hasn't. It brings Coughlin, his 2 sons, and various grandchildren together for family time.
The woods represents a place of quietness and serenity for Pat Coughlin, and each new spring brings him a chance to go out and observe the life of the forest, and also maybe to visit a few old friends.
See, now that one could stand a double tap, but it's got one branch up there that's dead. See, that's been broke off. So it's pretty well stressed, the tree, so we'll just put one in it.
He's been tapping trees on this land for most of his 61 years and now has a side business, Uncle John's Syrup. He taps about 1,300 trees a spring on this land, which is work, but it's also a labor of love.
We done 550 yesterday, and there was, what, 3 crews? You can do easy 400 a day, one person, if you work steady. If you ain't having fun, then it ain't no use being out here. Because it is too much work, really, but it is fun.
And as long as he's having fun, the product of Pat Coughlin's hobby might wind up on your breakfast pancakes. In Sawyer, Jeff Pappas, Channel 6 News.
think the property tax relief is great news for Douglas County and Superior. It's going to help with economic development up here. It's finally going to put us on a level playing field with the state of Minnesota as far as property taxes. Our income taxes and our sales taxes are lower, and now we're going to reduce property taxes, and I think we're going to be able to create some more jobs up here, and I think that's good news.
Most folks here in Bayfield are excited when the ferry starts operating each spring. Others need a little coaxing. As the last pickup truck rolled on deck, the Madeline Island Ferry was ready to make its first crossing of the year, something this ferry line's done every spring for the last 25.
This day always means that spring is going to happen. It's real close and real quick, and gets the island and the mainland back together again.
As he said, spring is going to happen. Today, it doesn't feel like it. There's still plenty of ice out here, most more than a foot thick. The going is slow. A trip that normally takes 15 minutes today takes more than an hour. For Captain Philip Schneeberger, it takes more than patience.
Perseverance.
The Island Queen crosses paths with the Nichevo 2, another ferry in the fleet, making its first trip from the island to Bayfield.
During the summer months, the Madeline Island Ferry is a big tourist attraction, but to the people of Bayfield and of Madeline Island, it's a practical means of getting to work and to school.
Today, most people are along for the free ride, braving bone-chilling winds and crushing ice, is something these folks perversely consider fun.
Is it? I don't know. I like it.
Richard Coleman lives on the island. He's coming back after getting a few supplies on the mainland.
Some cleaning stuff for spring cleaning, and six-pack of beer. I don't drink a lot, but just enough.
And as the ferry riders get anxious, the connection with Madeline Island is made. People, cars, dogs are once again connected by more than just ice. On the Madeline Island Ferry, Bill Lunn, Channel 6 News.
Conflict resolution and peer mediation is very popular all over the country now because we have such a problem with conflicts and with violence, and all of the research has shown that it really cuts down on disciplinary problems. Conflicts are less likely to occur, and when they do occur, they are more likely to be resolved without any kind of violence or disciplinary action.
It was the kind of day law enforcement dreads. An explosion at the Moose Lake Correctional Facility traps 12 inmates and 2 employees who are in dire need of rescue.
Get me out of here!
Fire crews from all over Carleton County came to the rescue of the victims, who were taken to a nearby triage station. But in the confusion, a second incident. 2 inmates take a prison worker hostage, which called for a special response team.
The bullet's coming. I'll let you know when it's in place.
From a command post near the scene, law enforcement worked to free the hostage while fire crews dealt with the explosion. And just when everything seemed to be going well,
Be advised that there's been a secondary explosion in the industry building, and we have numerous firefighters down and missing, so let the negotiators be aware of that.
That meant it was back to work for the rescue crews, who now had injured firemen to contend with.
Okay, we're going to get some oxygen on you to help you breathe.
Thankfully, it was all a drill. Response crews from all over the county were in Moose Lake today to improve their proficiency. Volunteers played the parts of inmates, and the practice was realistic, such as when this volunteer inmate tried to make a break from the fire scene. The incidents were a lot to deal with in one day, but in the end, the grades were good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a bad day for corrections. But, you know, again, there were so many departments involved. We were setting up different scenarios to get the maximum out of the training. Hopefully that would never be reality, to have so many things happening in one situation. But I think we did fairly well dealing with it.
Well, you're looking at people's ability to respond to unexpected situations. You're looking at response time. You're looking at your ability to communicate and make sure that people who need information get it in a timely manner. Those are the primary things.
And today's exercise was successful. The fire was put out, the hostage takers were captured, and more lessons had been learned in case it ever happens for real. In Moose Lake, Jeff Pappas, Channel 6 News.
When a strong nor'easter crashes blankets of 4-foot ice walls against one another, even a 700-footer like Elton Hoyt II can't get back in motion. Word that 6 oarboats were stuck in the barriers of Lake Superior traveled fast. Pretty soon, the ship canal was lined with cameras and binoculars.
They're just stuck. And the ice cedar drifted in. Last night, a boat came in with no problems at 6 o'clock, and then the Columbia Star came to here and got stuck and went back into the bay.
The Sundew was called out to break the Hoyt free. Behind the Hoyt sat 5 more oarboats patiently waiting their turn.
She's still working at it. She's going to plug away probably most of the day until she can get something happening.
But then, the moment of freedom arrived. The Elton Hoyt moved swiftly through the frigid waters and gave the green light for the Ogle Bay Norton to head east.
The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Sundew has proven her worth this morning, but officials with the Port Authority warned that this slow start in the shipping season will definitely have an economic impact.
Every hour that they're stuck costs the shipping companies thousands of dollars.
Yeah, more money than they want to spend. It's not good.
But with the demand for taconite coal and grain high, the shipping pressure is expected to continue. In Duluth, Molly McMillan, Channel 6 News.
The majority.
Organic farming is a concept that goes back to Plymouth Rock, but somewhere in between the plight of big business and the decline of American farming, it was lost. Now a group of Northland growers want to bring all natural vegetables and poultry back. No fertilizers and no pesticides.
78% of all the wells tested in southern Minnesota showed traces of atrazine in the water. Now, can we do that for another 500 years? Maybe so, but I doubt it. Are we going to be able to indefinitely continue using herbicides? Maybe we are, but I doubt it if we're going to continue to live.
By treating the soil with antifungal bacteria such as chamomile tea, organic growers can raise low-cost, high-yield crops, environmentally safe crops that don't rob the soil of its nutrients.
With the proper mix of human effort, animals, and plants, I think that we can have that a farm can become a self-sustaining entity, much in the same way that the forest out here is a self-sustaining entity, or a prairie.
In the past, chemical-free vegetables and meats were the only thing on the menu, so to speak. But times change, and traditionally small local farmers have caved to the American corporation known as mass production.
Today, most of the food that we buy travels 1,800 miles before it reaches our dinner tables. And 30, 40 years ago, probably 90, 95% of the food that was consumed in this whole Duluth area was produced locally.
Come summer, organic growers from throughout the Northland will converge weekly on sites in Duluth, Cloquet, and Superior to distribute vegetables as common as tomatoes and as rare as kale. Throwing a little poultry in for many, the local grocery store could be an uncommon errand this summer. In Renshaw, John Jetta, Channel 6 News.
6 or 8 that do.
It's an issue important to labor and management alike, workers' compensation, or more properly, its reform. On the one hand, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce says costs are moving out of control, and that's bad for business.
Clearly, we're not competitive with our neighboring states, and in a community like Duluth, being a border city, that's very important to Duluth businesses.
Not surprisingly, Labor has a different view. They say the Chamber is distorting the issue by confusing insurance rates with company costs and say the two are completely different. A 1994 Oregon study shows that in terms of insurance rates per $100 of payroll, Minnesota's rates are nearly 40% higher than Wisconsin's. But Labor officials point to a 1994 Minnesota Consumer Alliance report showing actual comp costs in Minnesota were lower than Wisconsin's as a percentage of payroll.
One could say if business or if workers' comp rates are that great in Wisconsin, why isn't everybody flocking over to Superior, and why isn't, for instance, the whole north end of Superior a huge industrial park instead of as it is?
But now the Department of Labor and Industry has entered the fray. A report released today says that in 1993, Minnesota costs as a percentage of payroll jumped by 8%, with total costs in that year of $1.22 billion, an all-time high. Wisconsin's 93 figures are not yet available.
One of our members who is currently expanding to Superior because it is cheaper for him, he testified during the Senate committee hearings on workers' comp, and that bill that he testified for was actually voted down in the Senate.
Sundstrom says that while the goal of controlling costs may be noble, anything that might reduce benefits to injured workers isn't.
If Labor was not standing up right now, I think, to the Chamber of Commerce and to business interest, I would hate to think of what would be the situation.
The controversy led to 7 workers' comp bills in this Minnesota legislative session. And as the time for decision draws near, one thing is certain: the debate is only beginning. In Duluth, Jeff Pappas, Channel 6 News.
Tried spawn early in the morning, and they were hitting on spawn, and then they just shut right down. And then once you put yarn on, you'll start getting a couple hits. The guys that know what they're doing with the yarn, they're getting the fish.
This is pretty mild. At least it's warm enough where you can work with your hands yet. Yeah, I hate to be showing everybody my secret lure. Yeah, they're in here. Got a pretty good current helping them out. Kind of the day like they like to move on. Some been catching them and some haven't, but it seems like everybody gets their turn. That's about time. Ooh, fish on. Oh, that's a nice looking fish too. He's right down here by Dale. Woo!
Yeah, there's fish up there. You know, the fish are coming in they're coming in. We need some rain to bring them all in, but we still got a good month and a half of steelhead in here. A lot of steelhead in time.
Environmentalists are suggesting Honeywell
He caught me on video last
Ask a group of people to define wellness, and chances are you'll get a variety of different answers. That's why today's seminar at Iron World USA was valuable. Take the title, for example, Velvet and Iron, Women on the Range. It shows the diversity that organizers say help make the day special.
And it represents the softness and gentleness of women, and yet the tremendous power and strength that we have to take care of what we have to do in our roles.
Today's seminars appeal to all of those roles, from discussions on nutrition and self-defense to craft work. Some appeal to the artist, like Ukrainian egg painting, while others appeal to the spiritual.
This eggs I let people to try, since everyone tried to make own.
How long does this take you?
It's approximately 4, 6 hours. It depends on design, what kind of design I make.
Dreams are attracted to the dream catcher, and specifically the stone, and then they go to the dream catcher, but the bad dreams get stuck in the webbing, and the good dream goes through the hole and comes down to you.
Whether it's through handiwork or information, the idea of the day is for women to encourage women to expand their horizons.
Everybody has something within them that they can develop. And that's kind of what I think we're trying to get at, is working on yourself and taking care of yourself as a woman.
I think we need to grow ourselves, and that's why we have this workshop. We want to bring in new ideas and just different views so that women can grow and learn in terms of self-awareness and just taking risks and making change. I think it's just really important to do.
In Chisholm, Jeff Pappas, Channel 6 News. While the issue of domestic abuse gets consistent national headlines, Superior residents got a chance to make their feelings known today as well. The Superior chapter of NOW sponsored a March for Women's Lives. It started at the library and went to the Douglas County Courthouse. The tone for the day, headlines aren't enough to stop a serious problem.
We need to, as a community, work together to make some changes. We need to hold the abusers accountable for their actions. We need to make sure that district attorneys are prosecuting these kinds of things.
The issue hit especially close to home for one participant. On December 14th of last year, Cheryl Schultz of Superior was shot and killed by her estranged husband. Today, Schultz's mother had a definite message.
Stopping the violence means a great deal to me. We need to strengthen the laws. We need to do whatever it takes to keep the women in this town safe. It shouldn't happen in a town like this.
Yet it does happen. The FBI estimates that an incident of domestic violence occurs every 12 seconds in the United States. The numbers are mind-boggling, but in the final analysis, it's not the numbers that count. Rather, it's the impact on victims and those left behind.
We miss her terribly. The children have a lot of trauma to overcome. They're in counseling. It's been very, very difficult. The anger and the rage that we feel is not an emotion that we normally feel, and that's been difficult dealing with that. Just the loss in general and the stupidity of the loss. It shouldn't have happened.
It's been said that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Those at this gathering today showed they're willing to take that journey one step at a time. In Superior, Jeff Pappas, Channel 6 News.
Their minds raced with confused thoughts as they all began, one by one, to say to him, Lord, is it I?
Just for the people who didn't get a chance the last time we were here for testing, just to capture the people that got their packages late and to give them an opportunity to come in and take the test.
Number 7, exam. Number 12,
The last two campaign badges that were issued were the Operation Hope for the Somalia